Hello. In this second podcast of the series, private investor Mark Atkinson will be offering his personal review of touchscreen manufacturer Zytronic, and, as usual, he will be providing some insights into his 40 years of investing experience. Welcome to the Desert Island Investor. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon to you, Paul.
Well, it's a lovely day on the island. The sun is shining. And today we're going to be talking a little about investing in high-tech companies, specifically in a company that manufactures the interface between machines and humans, which is touchscreen manufacturer Zytronic. Touchscreens have become a huge part of everybody's lives now. We use them when we're taking money out of the bank machine on the high street, and we use them when we're ordering food at McDonald's. So, Mark, what's your story behind your decision to invest in Zytronic?
Well, I'd like to think most or nearly all of my investments, it's long-term, the long-term drivers of and fortunes, hopefully, that this business has got. I see touchscreens and the way that we interact with products, or whether it be vending or gaming or signage, having a long-term future. So this is something I think that, and I'm not just looking 12 months ahead, I'm looking 10, 20, 30 years.
Now, this company's been in business a long time, Mark. What's their history?
Well, they were listed on AIM in 2000, but the company goes back to 1943. So they're making touch sensors or touch screens now, but that's not always the business that they've been involved in. Previous to that, they were making things like protection for cathode ray tubes and optical filters. But they've also manufactured curved ballistic visors for bomb disposal. So just let me know if you want to give one of those a bit of a trial, Paul.
So what are the main applications for Zytronic's touchscreens?
Yeah, well, the main categories for Zytronic are gaming and vending. In the past, it's been financials, but that's taken a little bit of a hit. Industrials, where people are using a touchscreen to operate a machine, and signage. I nearly said silage there, signage, but it's got a good spread of activities, which is always something that I like. It's not reliant on one, for example, just going back to the financials, that's taken a little bit of a hit. It's not been, too damaging to the business overall.
Did COVID have a serious impact on the business?
Massive impact, COVID. That's one of those things whereby, when you're looking at your investments, and you try and factor in as many things as you can, and then you get a black swan event like COVID comes along, and some businesses have bounced back, but this one's really taken a hit. The world's gone into shutdown for a couple of years, and we've got to look at it. We're looking at it from a UK perspective. If you look around the world, it's some people are emerging out of it a little bit later than what we are. So it's been a massive hit. It stopped a lot of important things to the business, like trade shows, which are very, very important. And even going down to touch screens, people weren't wanting to touch anything, were they? So that doesn't help. So which is quite interesting, because on the back of that, some of their touch screens are now non-touch; they're hover touch. So in order to get round that is they've got I think it's about 30 millimeters away. Once you get within a certain distance of the screen, you are interacting with it. So that's out of necessity is the mother of invention. So that could be a real winner. But certainly, it's a business that's been hit hard through COVID. The components problem that's been well documented has hit them, very, very badly. But hopefully they're in the process of dragging themselves up off the canvas, and hopefully we will see the green shoots soon.
And are the financials good, in your opinion?
Yeah, the businesses, the revenues are about 50% of what they were pre-COVID, but nevertheless, it's still generating cash. This company, I think, are they're controlling the controllables. They're doing whatever they can that's under their control. Things like the components crisis. There's a limit to what they can do. If it's a case of these chip or component suppliers, if they're going to supply Tesla, or are they going to supply Zytronic, who's going to be first in the queue? So they've had to get in line. They're having to buy these components on what they call the grey market. So that price is 3 or 4 times. So that's a hit. But if they can just weather this storm, I've got high hopes for this business in the long term. If they can come through this, then and they're doing quite well, given the brickbats that they've had to weather, then I think it could be a good future.
And what is Zytronic's market cap?
Well, the current market capitalisation is just 13.2 million. So this is a very, very small business. This is a small business. Its turnover is about 12.3 million. The turnover the last year was 12.3 million. But previously, the turnover was in the 20s, 22, 23 million, with profit regularly in the 4 to 5 million pound region. So it's been quite a hit. But there are some defensive qualities there in that it's currently holding 6.8 million pounds worth of cash, and if you include the land, the freehold property, and the long leasehold property, that's about 3.85 million, something like that. And that was interesting that came up is that that was last valued in 2012. So that will be interesting what that current value could be.
And in their operations outside of the UK, what's their geographical split?
Yeah, well, the largest split is Asia Pacific, which is almost predominantly South Korea, which is 45% of the turnover. After that, 30% is Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. 20% is the Americas, and then the UK, just 5%.
How many people work at Zytronic? Is it a large workforce?
Currently 121 employees. So that, again, it's a medium-sized concern.
You bought this stock back in 2015 at a price that is higher than the current value, but you've told me that You're still confident that it was the right choice. So what's your reasoning behind that?
Well, again, I think it's the long-term future. Just to be precise about it, my first entry back in 2015 was £3.05, and currently they're traded at £1.30. I made a couple of additions in subsequent years. Then COVID hit, which was very, very helpful, of course. And then last year, I was probably a little bit ahead of the game, whereby I thought the fortunes could be turning more quickly than what they did. I made 4 successive additions in 4 successive months at 153, 151, 163, and £1.80. I think I got my finger stuck at that stage. But I'm quite pleased where I am with this in relation to the portfolio. It's about 1.5% of my total holding, my portfolio.
Now, some time ago, I helped you build a raft out of bamboo, and I'd noticed it had gone missing for a couple of days. So where have you been?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for helping with that, Paul. I actually went to the AGM. The raft took me all the way up the Tyne, or Bladen, to be precise, and went to the AGM of Zytronic, which is the first time I've attended. And I have to say, it was a very, very useful exercise. I was very, very pleased with the annual general meeting. And for me, it was something of a blueprint in how an AGM should be conducted. It really was. I got there in good time. I always like to be prompt, but met the CEO, Mark Cambridge, downstairs, and he had a chat on a one-to-one. I was the first shareholder there. And I had a number of questions I wanted to ask on the day, and I wasn't. All these AGMs are slightly different, and you don't know how you're going to be received. So you think, well, I'm going to be allowed to ask all the questions that I'd like to. So I thought, well, I'll fill my boots now and start asking him some, just between the two of us. So I banked a few of those. And then, so he gave me some one-to-one time. I asked a question about John Walter, who is the new. He's a fellow shareholder, and he's coming onto the board as a temporary basis. And just said, what qualities could he bring? And Mark said, well, you can ask him yourself. He's just coming through the door now. So I met John, a really nice guy. I think we had about 10 minutes together.
So what's John Walter's background?
Well, John's a former investment banker and wealth manager with over 25 years experience. And he's worked for NatWest Markets and Chase Manhattan Bank. And now he's running his own fund. So he seems like he seems to know what he's doing.
So was it just an AGM, or did you get a chance to take a look around the production facility?
No, it was an annual general meeting followed by a tour of the factory. And these always offer value in that you're not just going to an office somewhere that's in the City of London, something like that. It's at their premises. So following that, I think the annual general meeting lasted for about an hour, and we had a tour of the factory. They've got 3 factories. So this is another thing that helps you understand when they describe these 3 factories. They're actually 3 separate buildings on the same site. So that helps you understand what they do. And their technical director, or our technical director, Andrew Morrison, we were split up into 2 groups. He took myself around and another shareholder, and he was absolutely fantastic. He really had very enthusiastic and had a way of communicating what the business does to somebody who's a bit of a layman like myself. And we went through it from the first factory whereby the raw glass comes in, where the glass is treated. It's become strengthened. It's perhaps bent, and then we go through to the other 2 factories, which are a mirror image of one another, and that's where they adhere the copper to it and put the brains on, which are the chips and the components. So it really was a good exercise for me to understand what they do, and you can see how they're adding value through the process. So it was 10 out of 10. It was time well spent.
So what kind of questions did you have for the executives there?
Well, I opened up with on the financial side, i.e. the ATMs. That's taken a little bit of a hit. And my question was, is this a long-term decline, or where we are just in the cycle? And the feeling was it was where we are in the cycle, in that these things really generally get remodeled every 5 or 7, 10 years, something like that. And the last time this came around for them to pitch, they missed out. They didn't feel like they had the right offering at that moment in time. So these opportunities will likely come around again. They're thinking about 2025, 27. So that'll be the chance to give them the next chance at it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win all that business, but at least they'll still think they're in the game. And then asked about vending. As I've mentioned, I do think this has got a long-term future, and I think they do as well. I think they feel that vending is going to be something that's going to be a long-term driver for the business. So it's another export. Sorry, go on, Paul.
So, well, I was going to ask, you were talking about being shown around, and another investor was being shown something. But how many people were there? Was it well attended?
There were five shareholders.
Is that kind of a normal? I mean, I know you see the real importance of going to these things, if you're a shareholder, but is that sort of like low or high?
Well, it depends on the company. But I did ask historically what kind of attendance they'd had, and they said it had varied. In the past, they've had about as many as 8, and sometimes on a previous occasion they'd had none. So I think 5 was about in the middle, which I've got to say probably gave me the opportunity to ask more of the questions that I wanted to. I mean, another one that I asked was, it's an export champion, but the UK only accounts for 5% of sales. And I said, is that not an opportunity that we can take advantage of? And really, the answer was, well, there's not a great deal of manufacturing in the UK. That's why it is, overseas. A lot of what they produce is sent overseas, and it comes back as product, as a finished ATM or a vending machine, a ticket machine, or something like that. But there's very little manufacturing of that utilise this technology in the UK. And then asked about the components. Again, the component problem, whereby they're having to pay 3 to 4 times in the going price in what they call the grey market. But I did ask about their existing supplier. I said, are they taking the advantage to price gouge? And they said, no, they're keeping the price the same. The only problem is that they can't get hold of any. So that's a problem that they've got. Now, they said they've been cannibalising certain products that they've got to get hold of these components, but there's a limit to what you can do from taking bits out of other machines. So there's that. Another question I posed was, in the report, it says that the 2 largest customers account for 33% of the revenue. So my question was, well, what does the biggest customer account for? It's not like 32% or 1%. And the answer again was, it's pretty evenly distributed between the two. It's almost identical. So that, again, that I've got all the eggs in one basket.
That's what you put here as like a potential risk, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I would obviously, I know you have to analyse the risks as well as the potential rewards with that.
Yeah. But I suppose out of I'd rather have the 33% split between, evenly between 2 rather than a bit lopsided. It's 30% and 3. And then I left my last question was what I call like a Columbo, which is by, it wasn't meant to be a Columbo, but it's like the number of accidents that they've had in the premises, which seem to be, that they give every year. And it was 13 for the last, 13 accidents over the year, which if you strip out the administrative staff, which I don't think they'll be going to hurting themselves with a photocopier or a stapler or something like that. So you've got 91 production staff. So that's an accident for about every 7 people. And I was assured that these are pretty low grade accidents. Somebody walks into a door or stubs their toe or something like that. That goes down as an accident. So, especially I asked that question before we had the factory tour as well, because I thought, is it safe to go around? That was quite reassuring that I wasn't going to be dodging, shards of glass or anything like that. But
there's probably a lot of people stub their fingers poking touch screens, all the time.
Yeah, repetitive strain or something like that.
RSI injuries.
Yeah.
So altogether, a worthwhile visit.
Yeah, it really was. I thought it was, leaving the fortunes of the business to one side, and hopefully it's got a good future. I thought it was an excellent exercise. It really, and I take my hats off. They were fully engaging. It wasn't a case that they're going to try and wrap this thing up as quickly as possible. They really wanted to engage with the show. In fact, they were quite. When I spoke to Mark, one of his disappointments is the low voting. In that the votes cast are just about 5% of the total, the total number of shares in issue. About, I think about just over 10 million.
So can anybody go to an AGM? Did you get invited specifically to this, or can any shareholder just turn up?
No, it's open to shareholders. It's open to shareholders. You've got to register to attend. You've got to, I went through my broker. And I've got to, advise them that I'm turning up, and I've got to take a passport to show that I'm who I am.
So if somebody listening to this is, like you said, starting the journey with this, and they wanted to look at going to AGMs as a part of their research, then it's not difficult to do that, but they can do it through their broker.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would highly recommend it. Yeah, you do pick things up. You do pick things up like almost by osmosis, and the character. One of the questions that was, another gentleman, he said, "Look, you were in the mid 20 millions, early 20 millions turnover. Do you think you can get back to that?" And it was quite a a forceful yes. That's very much the aim. There's no reason that why we can't. And really, I think once they get the components back in, then that's a real that's sort of slowing down the invoicing, because they just can't get those parts in to get the product out through the door. Now, one thing that they use quite a bit, there was an announcement on the day, AGM update, and some of the criteria that they use is the CRM, and it shows the opportunities that they've got. Now, this is what I call soft data. I don't know what you feel about CRMs, but it shows the opportunities in the pipeline and the opportunities that they've got. And they've got 505 live opportunities now, as against 484 at the financial year end. So that's going in the right direction. And this has got, they also give this a customer projected lifetime value. So that's not going to be in the next 12 months, but over its lifetime, what's what's the revenue likely to be? And that's about £61 million at the moment. Now, I call this soft data because nothing's guaranteed in any of this. It doesn't mean that because you're just because your opportunities have gone up 20% doesn't mean your turnover is going to go up 20%. But I concede that if you've no opportunities, it's not looking good. But it is a good guide. I would call it a guide rather than it's something. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. Guarantee is not a word in my vocabulary. If you want a guarantee, buy a watch. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, there's two bits of data that they put out on the day. One was the net cash, 6.10. That's a definite figure, That's something that's pretty concrete, the 6.8 million cash. The opportunities, great, but that's slightly softer data to me. But, it's still something to consider that they're traveling in the right direction.
Okay, so you mentioned something about share buybacks. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, well, this is a company that's been, historically very, very cash generative, and they've been using some of the excess cash in the absence. The argument is of anything better else to do with the money, rather go on some kind of folly of going on some kind of acquisition that backfires. It's either to give it back to the shareholders in the way of dividends or cancel some of the stock, cancel some of the shares. So since 2015, when I purchased into this business, they had 15.3 million shares, and through successive buybacks and tender offer, that's now down to 10.1 million. So just by standing still, my percentage in the business has grown. So they basically retired a third of the shares over the last 8 years. So that's a lot, and that is something. So again, if we can bounce back, this is hopefully that's been a good use of their money or our money, cancelling these shares. So basically, the profits any future profit is going to be divided by a fewer number of shares.
I mean, so obviously there's lots of advice out there for investors about using particular techniques to do the analysis of the worth of companies, but there's more than just looking at the raw data. Is more than just looking at the figures and the graphs. Your understanding of where the company's going and being able to discuss issues with them like that just gives you a far better insight.
Yeah, and you're looking at you're just looking at an organic business. You look at where's the world going. You might not be able to understand reports and accounts and the financials, but I think a lot of people have got a clear understanding of businesses that have got a good future and other ones that are in decline. For example, I wouldn't suggest buying a newspaper business these days. Anyway, just as a broad example.
So how do people find out about Zytronic?
Well, as ever, always go to the website. But in the case of Zytronic, they've got two websites. So have a look at both of those. One is the investor-led side, which is zytronicplc.com. But also there's a customer-focused website, zytronic.co.uk. So my advice would be to look at both of those. So, Paul, what have you got there?
Well, it's a bottle washed up on the beach earlier. Seems to have a message in it. Let's have a look. Well, it's not a message, it's a question in a bottle from a chap called Matthew Ellis. And Matthew asks, Mark, when do you sell your stock?
Well, what a good question. First, I'd say that I know Matt. I know Matt through investing, and his forte is investment trusts and dividend stocks. He likes his dividends, don't we all? And he's an exponent of FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And I thought I'd done well retiring at 53, but he's done it at 51. So well done, Matt. And he seems to spend a lot of time cycling around Europe. So well done there. So when to sell? I think, like a lot of investors, it's actually that's the more difficult side than the buying. When to sell, and probably the short answer is probably either too early or too late. Over the years, that's like a lot of people, but we get it wrong. It's that timing, it's that market timing thing. So one thing I've probably one of the reasons I've changed my philosophy over the years is because it is so difficult. It's a contributing factor into, well, hopefully I'll never sell because it's difficult to get it right, or trade as infrequently as I can. For in the case of going back to Zytronic, that's a stock that I'd held for 8 years. So there's a number of reasons why it's difficult. Price anchoring. People get obsessed with the price that they've paid, and really, once you've bought that stock, the price has no bearing on your decision making process, other than perhaps capital gains or something like that. If you buy it at £1 and it drops to 50 pence, then people hold on to a stock because they think that, well, I want it to get back to £1, but it doesn't know that stock doesn't know that you own it. It doesn't know that you want it to go back to £1. And if you think that, well, I've made a bad decision, the best thing is just to cut and run. I got it wrong, and get rid of it. Now, just because it's dropped, it doesn't mean you have to sell it, because you might think, again, going back to Zytron, the price has fallen down, but I think it's in a good place relative to the price. So why should I sell rather than think that, well, I've taken a loss? So, when it comes to losses, one of the benefits is that you can only lose 100%. That's the beauty of it. That's all you can lose. But on the upside, if you get it right, then it can multiply or multi-bag, a number of times. So, we hear of people going on, 10 baggers, something like that, So I think what you've got to accept is that if you've got a broad portfolio, there are going to be some losers. That's on the downside. So I wouldn't boot yourself up very much at all if you look at that portfolio. And a lot of people, going back to Lord Lee, for example, he advocates, if you've got a share that's declined sharply, just get rid of it, because looking at it on your screen saps your confidence. Well, that doesn't seem to affect me, in that I can just accept that there are going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers, and hopefully, the winners will do a lot better than the losers. So that's something that I can take on the chin. That if just accept that I've made a bad decision. All right, so the stock's gone down. Then you've got people who have stop losses. They put a price in. If it drops X percent that the stock sells, irrespective of what the reason might be, it might bounce back afterwards. I've never had a stop loss. So sometimes you'll have a stock that's, for example, take something like Greggs, for example. Sometimes that might have a bit of a hit if there's been some hot weather. People aren't eating sausage rolls. And short term, that takes a little bit of hit. I see those as buying opportunities to top up, because I'm looking 5, 10, 15 years ahead. I'm not just looking for I'm not sat there in front of the screen trying to buy and sell it in a day. In the past, I've top sliced when a stock's done very, very well. I've locked in some of my profit. I've perhaps sold, say 50% or something like that, locked in my profit. But now, I think I've learned from that, and I just tend to ride my winners a lot more. I don't just try to take that, a quick profit. There's sometimes demergers that can be a reason why I sell. In that, if a company splits into two and there's a part of the business I'm not particularly attracted to, I'll get rid of that element of it. Or sometimes, very, very infrequently, it's an even split, so you might be left with a small rump, and that doesn't have a pivotal role in the portfolio. So that's another time that I'd sell. I've got to say that, takeovers are probably one of the best reasons to sell, because the decision's taken out of your hands. That's you don't have to make a decision, so that's that very, very easy. I think I'm probably trying to hold them for the long time, to take that process out of the decision making process about when to sell. And then there's things like personal circumstances. My current house, it's I traded up a lot many years ago, and I had a largest holding in BT, and I liquidated that stock in order to put that capital into the house. So that's like a personal, sometimes your personal circumstances, necessitate a sale. Yeah, and then there was another circumstance where I made a sale. It was a stock that I held, paper manufacturer called James Cropper, and I was from the paper industry. I felt like I knew that very well. And at the time, I thought that share was very, very undervalued, which it was. And I bought a significant holding in that. And there really was a conviction purchase. And sure enough, the share price started recovering and took off, and it tripled. And I sold out of that. I sold out of that business because at the time I had a young family and I was in a sales profession, which can be precarious. And I decided to lock in that value and split that between 4 dividend stocks, because I thought if anything ever goes pear-shaped for me, that will provide me with some income that I can draw on if I need to. And that helped me sleep at night. That was where, because the fact was that that holding had grown out of total all proportion to, it was something like about 35% of my portfolio was in that holding. It really grown. So the truth is, I never lost my job, and that stock went on to go on, instead of tripling, it went on about 10 times. So I would have been better off holding it, but the price went from what I saw as value to speculative. Again, it's those personal circumstances that you've got to think about, about where you are. Now these things aren't as pivotal for me. Grown up family, no mortgage. These aren't the decisions I have to make. I don't have to lock in that kind of profit. I have trimmed the portfolio a little bit just to give me a little bit of headroom, because I thought I was bumping at the top of the portfolio in regards to numbers. So I've looked at some other businesses in the recent years. I've got I always have a couple on my watch list. It's never a broad list because there's a number of criteria they've got to get through. And I did some research on my broker Charles Stanley that looked attractive, and Devereux, the sausage skin maker, and that also looked attractive. But I didn't feel I had room in the portfolio. So both of those have been bought out. So perhaps if I'd have had a narrower portfolio, I'd have added those. So I've been gradually just reducing just a little bit the number, that just give me that opportunity if something comes along to add it to the portfolio. And one thing I've learned is that you can love a stock, but it can't love you back. And I think this is one thing that I'm a little bit susceptible to, is that because I invest for the long term and I get to know the business, sometimes I get to know the people, I find it a little bit, I won't say difficult to sell, but it's something I'm aware of. I try to fight any kind of emotional attachment. I try and be hard-headed, but I think I'm loath to sell sometimes because I've done a lot of research, and if I get rid of that business, then I've got to find something else. I've got to go on another kind of 5, 7, 8 year cycle of learning about that business and topping up that information. If I've got it wrong, I've got to fight that and just say, right, it's got to go. I've got it wrong, and it's got to go out the portfolio.
So I'm getting to understand that if you are investing in individual stocks rather than in a fund, then you're going to have to do more detailed analysis of the company and do your research and perhaps go to the AGMs. So yeah, I guess it must be harder to part company with that business if you had to. Yeah,
you can get very, you get to meet people, don't you? You form friendships with them, but you've got to still have that hard-headed decision. If it's not working for you, if the business takes a turn for the worse, and sometimes you've just got to say, I got it wrong. I don't have to be right on every one. I just need to be right more than I'm wrong. That's the way. I mean, if you look at a lot of investments, a lot of good investors, at the end of the year, they might have 50% of the shares might have gone up and 50% might have gone down. It's just that the 50% that have gone up have had more scope for, as again, there's no ceiling on the price that they can reach.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you would like to pop a question into a bottle for Mark, just post your question in the comments and hopefully it'll reach the island in time for the next episode. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.